Suzie, if I come to you, like every second client we have, and say, I want to set up a business or I want to invest in somebody else's business, what's going to be your first response?
Usually it's what does your shareholders agreement say?
And what's the shareholders agreement?
Well, that's often the other question, or we don't have one, is the usual response, unfortunately. And look, it's a key thing for businesses to have. We often talk about them as being a business prenup. So it's nice to have done up front in the honeymoon phase, if you will, because you want people getting on board and saying, well, this is how the business is going to be run, and this is what the life cycle of this is going to look like, and how do we get out of it eventually? You know, someone might retire, you might also want to bring investors in, you might want to sell the business, and these are things that whether it's a partnership agreement or a shareholders agreement, depending on the structure of your entity, you really need to be making sure that you have in order at an appropriate time before things go south, and that's probably the other issue we commonly have.
So let me ask you another question. It's a different time in my business cycle. I'm coming to you, Suzie. I said, I'm having a problem with my partner. How do I get this solved?
What does your agreement say?
And my agreement is my shareholders agreement.
Yes, well, unless it's a partnership, of course. And so, I mean, these are really important provisions that every business should know and understand. It's about exit rights, it's about notice, it's about buyout value and at what price point you have to buy someone else's shares and the mechanism for doing that. And it can be a really contentious time. And it can be fraught with difficulty, particularly if, for example, there's two business owners or two shareholders. What are your deadlock provisions? So getting those agreements drafted really well up front and having thought through those sort of issues is pretty critical.
I've heard it said, and probably by me, that you're better off having your fights with your partners before you sign the agreement rather than after you've signed it. It's always the case that if you talk through the big issues in the life cycle before you get going, you probably won't have to have that conversation again. But from another perspective, when it's the end of life and the people have to separate, if you do not have a shareholders agreement or a partnership agreement or the equivalent,
you won't agree on anything.
You won't agree on anything, and it'll be very expensive and very frustrating. So I guess you may not understand it from a layman's perspective, but there's huge value in creating your shareholders agreement.
Good tip.
Good tip.